I remember this very vividly, but I'll just tell you the best I can. Now, this how somehow happened in the spring break of 2016. Now, my friend, who we'll call him Adrian, was one of the top students in my school at the time. He and I had the same digital art class, and it was sometime in March when March break was around the corner. Shortly after that, this is when he had a really very shocking discovery. Now, since Adrian drove, he would sometimes drive to and from school, but other times though, he just usually walks home from school as he lives only a 10-minute walk. Sometimes he would take the car to go anywhere else if he had some other errands, but that happened to not be the case most of the time, unless said otherwise. Adrian and was off from school for to quote unquote spring break when school got out. I can't remember what day it was, but let's say it happened on a Monday. Adrian slept in and he just did what he normally do. Relaxes, lacks the professionality, and just kept doing what he normally did. However, though, he used to go for long walks along this really good path. He would drive his car there as he likes to go during the nighttime when at least things start to cool down. What I mean by that is it's not getting busy. So Adrian one night decided to go for a walk down the dirt road. So he walks down there where very few streetlights were. But as he was walking there, though, he realized that there was a hooded figure standing about maybe 4 or 5 feet away from him. From the nearest headlight, he can not headlight, but the street light, he can honestly see that there was a hooded figure. He was standing and staring towards the other way. He didn't notice him, thankfully, but he was just staring out of the blue. Adrian thought that maybe this guy was just waiting for a friend or something. So he tried to call out to him, but he didn't reply. All he just did was sat there and stared into the blue. He had no idea what he was staring at, but Adrian didn't want to know in case if this guy had any plans on kidnapping him or do God knows what. Adrian pretended that he didn't notice him and started to walk away when he suddenly noticed that the man slowly turned his attention towards Adrian. Adrian was nearly pissing himself. He ran back inside his car and drove off, and he just drove all the way back home. He never gone out there in that path again, but he still wonders why this man was there. He could have been maybe just a random person looking for attention for all he knew. But Adrian never walked that path at night, and he doesn't even know if that man ever came to visit him or even tried anything. But he's never seen him again that day. The police report said that they couldn't find anyone, so they assumed that he got arrested earlier, or he would have ran off. That was anyone's mystery. For the rest of the spring break, Adrian just did normal things like hanging out with friends and sleeping in, etc. He rarely tells his story to people, but when he did, it's mainly to people that he trusts the most. For some context, this took place when one student that I knew from school in 2015, his name was Weston, and Weston was pretty much in freshman year. Now, during spring break on his freshman year of high school, he and his friends were pretty much daredevils. They'd probably go on any dare whatsoever, even if people paid him. Weston was with his buddy, which we'll call him Jake. Jake was a very close friend to him. Weston and Jake liked to explore abandoned places and haunted houses, so they knew ghost hunting was one of their forte. Weston then was back from vacation in Florida with his family, and since it was Saturday, along with with Jake actually wanted to do something more fun. They wanted to go to an abandoned or haunted place before spring break was over. It was going to be a few days before they both had to go back to school. Although, on the other hand, they wanted to do something really crazy. They decided to go to an abandoned train station. Now, the train station has been abandoned and it was located in the nearest town. It was maybe about 4 hours away, but of course they wanted to try it. They ended up going to the train station, and once they do, they ended up realizing that the train track had overgrown grass. Although, since it was in the middle of winter, snow was covering it, but it was obvious that it was overgrown due to the fact that the train station had lack of usage over the years. It had been abandoned for a few years, so they headed inside the train station to look around. When they looked around, they could see graffiti, beer bottles, and etc. It was not a very pretty sight, but when they looked up, they can see that there was a shadowy figure just staring at them. When they hear a ghostly scream, it was their cue to get out of there. They got out of the train yard and headed all the way back home, praying to God that whatever it was didn't come after them. They still to this day wonder who was in that abandoned train station, if it was paranormal or if it was an actual person. They still don't plan to return to find out. This actually happened to one of my family members, which we'll call him Steve. Steve was my uncle, and this took place, I believe, sometime during March break. It was sometime around, I guess, in 2017. He never told anyone about this story, but he feels that this was the right moment. Now, Steve doesn't remember quite much about it, but he was home alone when spring break was going on. His kids, his 2 daughters, were at a sleepover, and his wife was at work, so Steve was alone at the time. Steve didn't have any work as he had a day off, so he ended up deciding to watch some TV for a while. After about maybe 4 or 5 minutes after watching TV for a bit, Steve heard a knock coming from the front door. Steve thought that it might have been his wife, so he went to open the door, but to see absolutely no one. He closed the door again and was about to resume watching TV when he suddenly heard the knock again. This time he got up and opened the door, but he still saw no one. Thinking there might have been some ding-dong ditchers or something, he closed the door and not even 5 seconds later, the door knocked again, and he immediately opened it to see absolutely no one. He looked everywhere, but he couldn't find anyone, and he reported it to the apartment security, but they reported the same. No one was there. This happened to one of my friends during spring break in 2017. It actually happened to another of my friends, which we'll call him Andrew. Andrew was with his girlfriend at the time, and he was going to visit his girlfriend in California. Now, Andrew's girlfriend at the time, we'll call her Angie, or Angel. Angel's name was Angie, really, but people call her Angel because she's the sweetest, kindest person anyone could ever ask for. However, Andrew and Angie decided to see each other in California since they hadn't seen each other in a few years. Now, they had been kids since they were young, and since they were college students, they had to meet up somewhere in California. I can't exactly remember where in California, but they met each other in California. When they got there on his first day, she actually greeted him, and he was allowed to sleep on the couch. They did have a guest room, but since Debbie at the time, Angie's uncle was visiting, so things had to be a little bit more, well, perplexed in a sense. Andrew and Angie decided that they would take a walk through the forest one day. Now, this was probably either on Tuesday or Wednesday. They went for a walk in the woods, and they were just talking about usual stuff. They also hunt for some hogs and even deer if there were any around. However, though, they had been hunting for a few years, and they had plenty of experience with using guns and other hunting tactics. It wasn't until when Angie and Andrew looked up to see that there was fire coming from in the forest. Now, the sun was starting to go down, so they had a good hour or so of daylight left. They were wondering, why would there be fire somewhere in the woods? They ended up walking over towards whatever it was, calling out if anyone was out there. But then they stopped and froze. They could see a car or something was on fire, followed by some people chanting something which sounded like a Yiddish chant. Angie and Andrew couldn't understand what they were saying, but they realized that this was some cult doing something, praying to something. Probably some demon or something. They didn't notice them, so Andrew ended up taking a few photos of it. But of course, he lost his camera because he dropped it. And as soon as he dropped it, the cult members in black shadow hoods all turned around to face them before they dashed back into the way they came from. They didn't even look back because they were afraid that one of the members would have followed. As soon as Andrew and Angie got into the car and sped off, they looked behind them, and thankfully, none of the cult members ever found them or even followed them further as they turned around and went back the way they were. They reported it to the police and the authorities, but the car was there, but it was demolished shortly after, and there was no traces of the cult ever being there. Angie and Andrew promised each other never to go there again, and they still don't plan to return to that site anytime soon.